That's a good start. Oh, I'll tell you what I need. I need a microphone, sorry. Not a great start. So, I'm here to talk about return on investment for UX. 20 minutes, really, 30 minutes is not going to be enough to cover this. And I think any of you who've tried to address it will probably know that already. 1 minute, I'm not very graceful, there we go. So it's probably not going to be enough to cover it. In fact, there's no question, without question of a doubt, that you could do this for 2 days and only just get to the bottom of it. So 30 minutes we're squeezing in really what's the most important. What are the things that really hold us back from showing return on investment? Can I just have a show of hands, just a feel for the room? Who's a UX strategist? Hands up. Ooh, we've got a couple, excellent. Who is a UX researcher? Couple, okay. Who's a UX architect / designer? I thought that might be the majority. And who's not UX? Ah, good. Now let's see other people coming along, because that's actually one of the problems we have, is articulating why UX is as good as it is at returning on investment. The risk of starting trouble. Who's a UX UI unicorn? I knew we'd have some unicorns in the room. Okay, so I personally have a little issue with UX UI unicorns. I'm not making any enemies straight away. So my problem, and it will come up later in the talk, is the idea that we're unicorns when actually we're omnicorns, and that UX UI are as closely related as they are. And in fact, you'll see when I go through our DNA why they're the least related to what we do. So before I take you down the rabbit hole, a little bit about me. I'm a full spectrum UXer. I do strategy, research, and architecture. I don't know if any of you are. I hate people with opinions but no data, and as a result, I have to make sure that airlines know not to sit me next to them. A little bit about me. I'll go through as quickly as I can because we don't have much time. I've worked for about 70 different companies. I've consulted and contracted all over the place, from San Francisco to Vienna. Lots of different companies, most recently Barclaycard in Germany, CERN in Switzerland, and I'm working in London again now for a consultancy. I am NNG UX certified. Does anybody not know who Nielsen Norman Group are? Hands up. They are the godfathers of UX. If anyone could be said to be the inventor of UX, it is the Nielsen Norman Group. If you are going to get any certification, I shouldn't be promoting them, but if you're going to get certification, they're the people to go through. They really know their stuff. I'm also a member of the Pistori Alliance. They are I'm a member of the UXLS branch of the Pistori Alliance. They are a life sciences group that advise the life sciences industry on how to put in best practices, because they're highly competitive. So once you get into the competitive environment, they don't share shit. So if you want to get good UX standards into the life sciences environment, specifically pharmaceuticals, you have to volunteer at a low, non-competitive level. So I'm a member of that. I'm also a published author for A-Press, and if this ever moves. And I've worked in just about every sector there is. In fact, I think aerospace and defense is the one that's left on my bucket list. So if anyone knows anyone at NASA or at SpaceX, speak to me afterwards. So, strategic return on investment. Profits, revenue, efficiency, KPIs, customer numbers, dollars. Hands up, everyone who thinks they're here to understand how UX returns on that. You don't. Because if you don't put your hand up, I'm going to ask you what you are here for. Yes. So traditionally, this is what we think of. We think of it actually returning dollar value for UX. No other discipline really has to do this. And this is partly because culturally we're a big change. We're making the business change the way they actually operate their delivery model. And this is uncomfortable for them. So they challenge us to justify our existence, unfortunately. But there's no question about it. There's lots of stats out there. This is a great set of stats. $2 spent on UX returns $100. Forbes published that. In fact, when they published it first, it was $1, so it's gone down a bit. Only 50% return, 50 times return. Focusing on UX reduces support costs by 90%. That's huge. I did some service design recently, and we saw these figures coming into reality. They're actually being delivered. 50% of a developer's time is spent doing rework because the requirements were not specified correctly first time. How many people worked at an agency? Yeah, how often do they just go, yeah, just do it. This is what it looks like, build that. And then you have to go, oh, that didn't work, I have to do it again. Huge waste of time. And of course you end up with this gang of fuming developers who won't speak to anyone except to bite. Fixing a user experience error after development is up to 100 times more expensive. These are massive numbers. If you're going to talk about UX returning on strategic investment, here you have it. I mean, no one else comes close. No other discipline in a company can return that kind of ROI. There is a key differentiator too. You hear a lot of talk about the service economy, but services are becoming quite commoditized now. They're basically competing on price. And even marketing companies are starting to talk about the fact that UX is the only real differentiator. If you want to actually keep your price high and not race to the bottom, UX is the way you've got to go. And certainly, big companies, this is a bit of a lame quote. Founders at Google attended usability classes. But they are very big on UX. So are Amazon. In fact, they funded customer experience over advertising 100 to 0. What that means is they took all the money from advertising and put it in UX. Airbnb attributes UX specifically for taking them from near failure to a $10 billion value. Again, these numbers are not small. And in fact, there's a race on at the moment. I don't know if any of you have seen this. Google, so Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple are racing to be the first trillion-dollar companies in the world. All three of them put users first. The numbers that come out of this to show how UX returns on investment are massive. So thank you for coming. I hope you enjoy the talk. Thank you. It's you again, right? Yeah. I like that table. But of course, I'd like a show of hands. How many people actually feel that they do return on investment to the true potential of the UX within the company, that are recognized for returning that value? Because we know we can. I mean, it's unavoidable. UX literally understands what the business does, safeguards the process all the way through, architects it, handholds, and understands exactly what the user is going to part with the most money for because it makes them the most happy. So I'm going to get specific about this. So now we're talking about tactical return on investment, not strategic, during the actual project. How we get from one end to the other through the departments. And this actually comes down to well, actually, I'll give you some examples first, hang on. So you tend to experience all of these. So UX ignorance, slightly combative term. But people don't understand what UX does, where it starts, where it finishes, what we should be getting out of it, what we should be putting into it, when they should be speaking to UX. As a result, it's seen as a tactical piece of work. Have we done UX? Yes. Have we done development? Yes. Have we done UI? Yes. Well, we're done, then we're user-centered. No, because UX don't sit down here. They sit here. And they touch every discipline, and there's a reason for that. These departments that we have to deal with, BAs, POs, development, systems architecture, they have their own biases, fears, they're worried about their territory, and they've got good reason to be as well. So you tend to find that the biases are confirmation bias. I know what the user wants. I could do a whole talk on biases. This is the way we've always done it. Again, we're a cultural change in UX, so it's a real problem for them. So there's a lot of pushback. Fears and territory. We all come from different departments, and even those who do UX, I doubt there's anyone here who's come from UX to do UX. You've probably come from a different background and got tired of seeing the UX not being done right and said, that's it, I'm stepping in, I'm going to do something. And you've become UX. I know that's what I've done. Those territories are because you come from a background where the UX part of what you did wasn't delivered. Now you're doing that, and you're doing everything else too. And when you go back to the people you came from, you'll be doing the UX part of their job, and they won't like that. It'll feel like you're stepping on their toes, it'll feel like you're telling them what to do. This happens everywhere I've ever been. They have mental models about how things should be, and again, and how they see the world. Politics, you cannot deal with politics, and yet it is absolutely a layer of UX. you need to understand what drives people. I was at a conference recently and listening to someone who was extremely knowledgeable, very high up in the consulting world, very high up in UX strategy. And she was saying, you actually need to build an organogram, and not just of how everyone's put together, but of what those relationships are. Who are the blockers? Who are the advocates? Who's sleeping with? I'm not joking. And of course you have to put up with siloed decision making and KPIs, and those two things are linked. And I'm going to pick on developers. Is there any developers in the room or ex-developers? Yeah, I apologise now. I was one too, so I'm not picking on you. It's just that I know the environment. So each department has a handover. This is your job now. Okay, thank you. You've got 2 weeks to carry out this sprint, and you must deliver this much work in this much time. That's their metric. So that's their decision-making process taken care of. I've got to deliver that in this week by any means necessary, and developers are a great example. I worked with a development team recently, and they had to get 10 features delivered in 2 weeks, one sprint. So basically it was, like everyone else, we will find ways to cut corners, deliver this, and at the end of the 2 weeks they delivered 10 shit features. And they were going, yes, we delivered them. And their bosses went, yes, you did. But it was shit. It didn't matter. And they lost sight of it. And this is the problem with siloed decision making. You can let go of accountability. It's mine now, it's not mine anymore. UX does not do that. And that comes down to the KPIs and how they're measured. So I wanted to talk about the formula that they use. They say, we need to deliver a main goal, and we can't afford to waste time with a trivial subtask. So you'll probably have seen it more realistically like this. We need to deliver the product quickly, and we can't afford to waste time doing research or UX. Yeah, I hear a lot of yes. That's great, and it would work if it is translated to, we need to get out the burning building quickly, and we can't afford to waste time washing the dishes before we go. That's a reasonable argument, but they're trivializing UX, and they're pushing back. And again, it's down to those KPIs, there's fear of what you're doing, the changes. They do not like this, and it's understandable. I understand it, it's true, but it's wrong, because the real argument is this. We need to cross the river quickly, and we can't afford to waste time learning to swim. They will, though. So I'll go back to the developer example. They will jump in the river. Their job starts at this side of the river, this bank, and it ends at that bank, and they don't care about what comes before or what comes after. And it's not just developers. I'm being clear about this. This is every department. They all suffer the same problem. They'll jump in that river. They'll swim across. People will drown. They'll come out the other side covered in leeches and cuts. There'll be a crocodile on this arm. And they'll be soaking wet and freezing cold, and they'll get out the water and they'll look back across the river at you in UX and they'll go, that is what you call agile. And worse, they'll use it as advocacy that UX is pointless. They'll go, see, we didn't need UX. We got to the other side. They forget that they have to do it again. They lost several people, that perhaps there was no point in doing that in the first case, because now the whole point was to cross something big across the river. You need a bridge. They don't care about that. They delivered, and their bosses go, yeah. So we have all this to come up against. This is a problem, because these metrics are designed to justify the existence of a department, not to deliver on what the user wants. And this is a huge problem for UX. This is everywhere. So this is one of the things we have to learn to deal with, the tactical return on investment, not the strategic one. So I want to cover our history a little bit, because that's relevant. So UX was born of many bastard parents. And many of you probably come from these backgrounds. I know I come from lots of them, actually. And in fact, it's kind of a lucky way I got into UX. So there's a certain portion of each of those that was UX. And any of you who come from other disciplines, you know this. You know the bit that was UX, and you do that bit. And if you do it well. In the old days, maybe you'd have had a company that actually had representatives, heads, in each of those departments that really got UX. By wild luck. Apple was probably an example in the early days. They delivered stuff that really worked. And they just, they had a maniac in charge. So if you didn't do UX as your department, you were beaten with a stick. We think we're T-shaped, and we are. We come from a particular skill set, and we know a bit about all of these. Sorry. If you're going to be good at UX, you have to become key-shaped. We have to deal with this tactical ROI, which means we have to be able to speak to each of those disciplines in their own languages in ways that make them think, great, that really works for me, that helps me. And that means that you, not them, you have to learn about their business. And I admit, it's a long roadmap. You know, becoming top-notch UX requires a lot of study. I mean, you probably do it anyway. But it's really important to remember that the reason it's so important is because this thread runs through all of them. When the PO sits down and talks to you about how something's going to work, you need to validate their assumptions. But you need to go to the BA afterwards, if they still exist. And you need to speak to them about how that will move forward. And maybe marketing and brand have some input. But you need to be able to speak to them in their own language. And systems architecture, you might think that's totally unrelated. I'm going to come back to that. The real shape of that, of course, is this. We're not like that little 25% involved. The amount of UX that's in a department varies from discipline to discipline. And the amount that we've absorbed into UX is variable as well. I used to be an information architect. It was a job. Not anymore. You need to understand that to deliver good UX. I firmly believe that BAs will disappear very soon, because wherever I've gone, I do the UX, and the BA goes, well, what will I do then? Because there's very little left for them to do. They're actually one of our biggest challenges. POs will go the same way. Funny enough, I was at the Nielsen Norman Group a while ago, and I was talking to some of their seniors there, saying, I don't see how POs can continue to be on every single job at every single company. We do so much of their work. When we get in, we must get under the skin of a product and a business and really understand what the business is trying to do in order to be able to match that to what the user wants and bring them together. We're no longer, I mean, we're called user experience with a very poor name. We are experience, and we need to understand the business and the user. This is why I say omnicorn, not unicorn. And this is why I say UI, UX is not a real thing. Doesn't make me many friends saying that. But the reason is that by the time you get to UI, you're handing the UX off. We have so much other work to do here. And honestly, if you're not doing all this work, you have to question the level of UX you're at and start to say, how will I get back into a full UX role? Where do I need to start learning next? What's the path of least resistance? Because if you're doing this, I assure you, someone back here will have fucked up. They will not have done the UX, and you'll be designing or prototyping something that will not work. You must understand all of these disciplines. So, you can't deliver on strategic UX unless on the ROI of strategic UX, unless you're doing tactical ROI. So for that, you've got to speak their language. You've got to understand what investment means and return means to those people. And when you get to a tactical level, it's slightly different. So I'm going to run you through some of the, a couple of the roles, because I'm not sure how much time I've got left. I got enough. So PO is a great example. They're the first people we build a relationship with, and they really should be. They're a main portal to the business. And you do not want to be going through the BA to get to the PO. The investment for a PO is a shared thing, for a PO and for us, in fact. That investment comes from both sides. The investment here is that they need to tell us, to explain to us, and we need to take time to understand what the elevator pitch is for that product. We need to understand what their timescales, budgets, target audience, competitors are. We need to do our research. We need to be able to have that discussion so that we really understand that product, what they're trying to achieve, what their goal is, because it's almost a strategic level there, but not. In return, they get things like clarity, a single point of truth. We can give them a prototype or a discussionary prototype or user journeys that really genuinely deliver on what they had in mind. Because I don't know how many of you work with POs a lot, but they can be quite scatterbrained. You know, they have this idea they have this concept from the business, they don't have it crystallized in front of them. And us being able to understand what they really want and turn that into a single point of truth, a prototype, for example, is hugely important to them. Gives them confidence, allows them to deliver properly, allows them to communicate the message properly, and they use us to do that. We have 20% uptake, just like we asked. We feel we can deliver on that. And they get credit for success, and this right here is really important. Everyone we work with right now wants credit for their success. We deliver that success for them. I'm not being, cocky. I'm not saying, yeah, you can't get by without us. The reality is that we know we deliver that success. It's not us, that is not our opinions, it's our data from our users. We do not need credit. We need advocacy at this point. If we get advocacy and they get credit, they will move up the chain, they will get their bonuses, they'll be very happy with us, and they will tell people, if you're going to do that project, do UX. We need that advocacy because that builds trust. And trust, one thing there, is what all of this is about. We need to build trust within those disciplines. You can't do it without understanding how they work and what the return on investment is for them. BAs. So this is a tricky one because again, BAs and UX, very similar roles. You can build a certain level of trust and advocacy from them. And you can do this by showing them you've got a comprehensive grasp of the products and services. Again, it's what they do, what we do. You have a strong agile knowledge. They tend to be very strongly agile. So it's really important your agile knowledge up to scratch. Strong stakeholder management because they'll have to speak to them and you'll have to speak to them. And they want to know that you're not going to say something stupid to the user or to the stakeholder. So they want to be confident that when you speak to the stakeholder, you're probably on the same page and you're going to say the same problems, stand up for the problems that are there and deliver the right things. And cogent story writing and mapping. Story mapping, I'm just going to show you a quick example, is actually really useful with BAs. Sorry, it's a bit overexposed. So this is a story map from Jira. Well, it's not from Jira, it's referencing Jira stories. So when a BA wants to know how you're working, I find producing visual documents like this for them really help them get that trust feeling. They know what stories they're trying to deliver. They generally do all the stories in Jira or whatever program you're using to deliver your agile stories. And this sort of diagram will enable them to understand that you have a cogent plan in place, that you are delivering to a plan in order. So this, for example, each one of these is a story. That's an epic. And for the sake of the BA, I put in who run the task. At this time, I was running a design and development team as well as the UX. So I wanted to show the dependencies on the work we're delivering. So you have a sprint. The sprint box contains all the work that we'd be doing. You have the Jira story numbers, you have the reference to the title and who's doing it. So this is the UX work I was doing. I put in links so they could click through and go to the prototype. So again, they got that visibility and they felt they were in control. And it's got things like story points on it and whether it's ready to go, so it's going to be worked on or it's been done. And that gives them that level of trust. You need to build these kind of simple diagrams for each department. Systems architecture are an interesting one. They seem like they're completely dissociated from user experience and from the delivery process, but they're really not. Though they have a lot of strategic work to do and they're putting big money into building systems and networks and security and software, they build it at a very high strategic level when they shouldn't. And this is a change to the culture too. This is one of the first things I do whenever I go to a client. I find the systems architect and I say, show me the architecture, show me how it works. Because I don't want to be going to the developers and saying, build this system, build a fingerprint recognition system, and then go off and try and develop it. And then the systems architect goes, we don't have the money for that. That's £2 million, I'm not going to spend on that. So you need to have conversations with them early because they are real key holders to you being able to deliver. They have limitations and they have abilities to deliver that they would like to put in place. But if you let them go off and be generic systems architects, they'll deliver best practices. So if the corporation wanted to increase user base by 50%, they'd be looking at a bigger database. That's it. They don't understand the workload that's coming from the actual deliverables you're building. They don't understand how it's going to affect what they're building, what the interactions will be, what the workload. So they want you to be able to have an understanding of current systems architecture, have discussions on how UX affects their plans, their priorities, their requirements, their budget. They need to know what the user's going to do so they can build systems for that. This is one of the big problems that's always been with UX, that we try to shoehorn the solution into an existing architecture. They want to know that you have the ability to recognize and debate legitimate systems limitations and opportunities. I know this sounds really technical, and for those of you who don't come from a technical background, it probably sounds a bit intimidating. And in fact, it's going to be more intimidating in a second. Hang on, I'll show you it now. No, wait, I'll go through the returns. So in response to that, what they get is they get this comfort that you understand the effects and the costs and savings and the security and the data flow and the maintenance And they know they can build to that. They know they've had a cogent conversation with you, that you know your stuff, that you're not going to do something that means that 2 months down the line, the developers are going to go, but we need to build this. And systems architects are going to go, we can't. We don't have the money for that. That system doesn't exist. Those things don't even talk. And it allows them, you're helping them, in fact. You're helping them to make mid to long-term architectural and cost decisions, which they would have done on the fly otherwise. And of course, again, this returns trust and advocacy for us. This little ditty, this is a ecosystem relationship diagram. It's based on systems architecture. Simple little thing, right? I advise you, whenever you start a company, go and sit down with a systems architect. Get them to draw out how the systems work. This looks complicated, but actually, when I go through it with them, they'll tell you this system does this and this system does that. And it talks to these by this prototype, or this protocol, sorry. Prototype, got on the brain. This protocol, it sends this sort of data, it does it overnight by a batch, and then you go, okay, that's as is. And as you go away and you start to architect what the solution should be, what the users actually want, you'll discover that they want to speak to this system and this system at the same time. And look, there's no connection. Hey, systems architect, we've got this problem. These two systems need to talk because this database is separate. And that won't deliver our fingerprint recognition system. You give them the chance to actually fix this in advance or to put it into the roadmap. There's things that won't be delivered. And what we're doing here is we're not fixing everything. You can't. You've got to change an entire culture. But what you're doing is you're making them aware that you know their stuff. You can have grown-up, sensible conversations about how it will affect them. And you empathize with that. In fact, this is the only time you're going to hear me use that word. You can empathize technologically with them. As a result, they will treat you with respect and trust, and they will start to advocate UX. Because without that, you're never, never returning investment at a strategic level. Not ever. Information architects, well, you won't have to talk to them because you are them. If you're not already doing your information architecture, you will be. Developers, again, special bunch. Yes. Sorry, I was one, so. They're at the end of the food chain. If timelines get compressed, they get compressed down on the developers. They're an angry bunch in the end, and it's our fault. They don't need to be an angry bunch. They're very creative, very smart people. And what they want to do is they want to be involved in the delivery discussions. They've got great ideas. They're very logical people. They will pull out problems that you haven't seen yet. Involve them in your discussions about what you're trying to fix. Also show them that you understand the frameworks, the language, the APIs. You've got a familiarity. And a lot of this will come out of the systems architecture. You know, I've often had to say, okay, well, this system doesn't talk to that. You're going to need to write an API for that. And this is the data you're going to need to transfer. And this is how often. I don't need to know how to write an API. I just need to know it exists and it will communicate. And I can give them the information they need in plenty of time. Again, UX are useful, brilliant. They're making my life easier. I'm not having to repeat my work or waste my time. In return, they get reusable functions and pattern recognition. I think UXers generally have quite pattern-focused minds. We see patterns in things, and so do developers. We'll show them that we've had those system considerations and limitations. We're familiar with them, and we're not asking them to build something that simply cannot be built. We're not asking them to spend 2 months building something that the systems architect goes, no, I'm not spending £1 million on that. Too bad, do something else. We've considered the full form factor, the responsive considerations. Of course we have. We haven't just gone, here's the mobile and good luck with the desktop. And most importantly for them, we give them a full, reliable architecture that's right first time. This is the same thing we do with the PO. We end up with a prototype that is a single source of truth. It will not change. They will not spend 50% more time doing this work. This builds huge trust and advocacy. In return, that's what we get. Now, there are loads of other departments, and I haven't got time to go through them all. And they all suffer the same problems in different ways. And it's really important you get to know these departments so you can understand what the return on investment is for them, why they would advocate UX, how you can help them, how you can make them look better to their bosses, get their bonuses, get promoted. I know, it sounds political, but it really is where we exist at the moment. So, I thought I'd throw up some resistance lines that you may have all heard. So, show of hands. Who has ever been told the user is wrong? Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? Who has ever been told, we'll go back and fix it later? Yeah. Who's ever been told, UX are holding everything up? I'm going to have to put 2 hands up for that one. I hear it so much. This doesn't need UXing. Like you can just go, UX'd. We just have to deliver something. We haven't got time to do UX. We've got 2 weeks. We don't need research, just do the UX. UX is an overhead, it's not necessary. And it's a minimum viable product. The emphasis being that it's viable because it's minimum. Right, so what I haven't included here, so I don't have time, is some advice on where to hide the bodies. I will do a follow-up on that. So, just quickly going back to strategic UX, right? It's important that we do strategic UX in the end, we get to that point, because we need a seat at the board. UX is massively strategic. It makes, as you saw, and as you probably already know, massive amounts of money. I can't help but always think how frustrated I am that if just one company would fully embrace UX, that company would rule the world. They would obliterate their competitors completely. You only have to look at the figures. But to do that, you also have to speak the language of business. And this is another area where we're weak, where we need to improve. UX professional must learn to articulate UX in the language of business. Nielsen Norman Group. Again, if anyone says something like that in the Nielsen Norman Group, you need to listen. And that's because we sit in the middle. We talk user. We talk technology. And this is the tactical stuff. And I say technology, realistically, that's the delivery process. That's the business. We need to talk technology a lot less than we do departments and tactical. And we need to talk business, because we're communicators and collaborators and translators. If you can't turn cognitive load into a term that the business can understand, it doesn't matter what you say to them. You need to be able to turn what you've learnt into business language. This is how it helps you. I was going to show you this, and we'll have time. No, I won't have time, damn it. Sorry, I don't have time. I'll show you it later. If there's time. So the business, and again, the same thing. So now we're back to a strategic level, and it's the same sort of thing. But the investment here is that they need to explain to us, and we need to hunt down and understand the corporate strategic plans and priorities. Really is important to get that strategy. It'll be out there. They publish it on their yearly, whatever it's called, quarterly findings or yearly publications about the company. We need to understand what their metrics are for revenue and profit. And you need to know the difference between revenue and profit, more importantly. And the customer metrics, because we need to speak to them in those terms. That's what they want to hear. How is what you do going to make us money? We know it will, but you have to translate it into their terms. In return, the business get the savings, efficiency, and operational expenditure savings that they want. And service design is something I've not really covered, and it's a huge part of what we do and will become a bigger part of what we do. But it does all that. You know, they get insights to direct their strategy later on. We feed back into that strategy. We help them get a more successful strategy. That's huge. That's C-level work. There aren't enough CXOs, and the ones that aren't really X anything. They're probably creative directors who also have a CXO. And of course, they build up customer loyalty and numbers. And bottom line is they make money. They make dollars. In return, we get trust, advocacy, and power. Power. Not future domino of Earth level power, but it's a start. So, very briefly, there are strategic resources. I didn't have time with the talk to get all the resources in here. I will make sure that the guys manage to bring this to send all these on. So you can get 12 months of customer and financial benchmark data. This is critical when you first get in there. Go and see people, find them, dig them out. Guerrilla research, find the data. Do not be told you cannot speak to someone. Do not. People really want to get that data out. They really are frustrated about things. And you need to find these people, get this data, find out what the company's performing like, and find out what those metrics are. I can't be any more specific than that because each sector and each department and each business is different. So find those metrics. There are some obvious data options, you know, where to go to. So you can go to business intelligence, customer services, An analytics team, yes, talk to the PO about the value proposition. And SMEs, subject matter experts. They're desperate to share the data with you and give you qualitative information. And they really have it, it's gold. So track down people in departments that have to deal with stuff under the hood. Initial measurements, obviously establish a baseline for the last 12 months of analytics, customer complaints, profits, customer numbers, metrics, etc. Actually build out a table and you can see a profile then. And that gives them something you can hand on. And again, we're back to it being strategic. You can go, right, this is your last 12 months performance across all of these indices, all these matrix. I've got them from this department, this department, this department. They'll be amazed by that alone. They'll be telling you, no one else internally has ever managed to give me this. And you can say, right, well, if you project these forward with no change to the UX, you end up here. The return on investment right there to C-level and high-level stakeholders is huge. Because as soon as you implement the UX, those numbers will go flying up. If they don't, then you're in trouble. Takeaways, again, you can't prove strategic ROI without tactical buy-in. This is really the big thing right now. You need to work on that tactical buy-in. Forget strategic ROI, it'll just happen. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely methodologies, tools, and I'd love to have shared those with you. And in fact, I was going to when I first volunteered for the talk. But then as I sat down and thought it through, I thought, well, none of us ever deliver on this shit. Why? Well, of course, this is why. So focus on this. We can always come back and give you a list of things that you can do and tools and resources, and a list that long. But they'll be no use to you yet. Learn to speak business. I think those are the two things you should really take away from here. Learn to speak to the business in business terms, to translate what we do into business terms. It's not going to help you immediately, but it will start to build that level of trust. And it's not going to help you immediately because tactical buy-in is the issue. So that's me. If you need to contact me, those are email, LinkedIn. Thank you very much.